I'm Sean Fennessey, and this is The Big Picture, a conversation show about Emilia Pérez and the Best Picture race. Today on the show, we are discussing Jacques Audiard's audacious, new, hyper-stylized musical crime saga, trans coming-of-age family drama. It's Emilia Pérez. We're taking stock of a fascinating, for a change, Best Picture race. It's all up in the air right now. So I've got two great awards season thinkers here today, returning champion and ringer icon Joanna Robinson, and her old pal reunited and first-time Big Picture guest Katey Rich. Katey is the awards editor at The Ankler, the host of the Prestige Junkie podcast. She's been covering this awards game for many, many years. Guys, hi.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. Reuniting with Joanna and with Sean. We've been on my podcast together, just reunions all over the place.
I'm so glad you guys are here. This has been a really interesting start to the awards race because I tend to think I have a pretty good handle on these things. You've both covered this stuff for many years. I can't recall a time going all the way back to my 1990s Reading Entertainment Weekly era where I was like, I don't really know what's winning, so to speak, what's in the lead, what even the front runners to me are a little bit baffling. And so the movie that we'll talk about in the second half of this conversation is one of those kind of confusion points for me in terms of it being a front runner. And so I'm curious to hear whether you guys think it is one. But something has happened in recent weeks here in the United States of America, which is there was an election. Donald Trump was elected 47th president. Yeah, it's true, Joanna.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
vibes
that happened.
Are great. We're feeling great.
So everything's good about that. And it did have me thinking about 2016, which is a monumental award season year, in part because that was the year just 5 weeks after Trump was elected for the first time as president, that Moonlight shockingly defeated La La Land in the great mix-up of that season. And that, I think, changed the Oscars forever. I remember writing a column about it at the time, that there had never been a winner quite like that. And there are some people who read that win as a kind of reaction to the state of the country. Maybe that's overreading it. I'm not quite sure. But I'm curious, just as a starting point of this conversation, do you guys foresee a response to the world at large in the potential Best Picture winner this year? Katey, I'll start with you.
I mean, I've been saying for months, like everybody remember in 2016, everyone slightly lost their minds in the awards race. And I think it's not overreading it at all to be like, there was this version of the story where La La Land stood in for Trump and Moonlight stood in for Hillary Clinton. And like the further away we get from that, the more insane that those correlations sound. But the idea of supporting a movie that's about, healing past trauma and just like allowing Black people to star in a Best Picture winner, which had very rarely happened before. Like that was all mixed up in this like resistance era that was just starting at that point. Like Meryl Streep got a standing ovation at the Golden Globes for talking about Muslims. I don't even remember. Like the vibes were so strange. And the thing I can't figure out, we're like 2 weeks past, or not even 2 weeks past the election now, is like, it's definitely different this time. There isn't the like resistance energy building. There's not a like, we all want to get behind a Nora because it's a story about a woman and women were defeated this election. Like it feels sadder, more complicated, scarier in some ways. And it only muddles the picture. Like I thought we were going to wait until the election and then kind of take a breath and be like, all right, here's what we've got. And like, I feel less clear on it than I did before, which is maybe appropriate for what 2024 has been like so far.
What do you think, Joe? You agree with that?
Yeah, I think I don't understand what the tone is going to be at the start of next year, because I think everyone is in this sort of, not everyone, but the people who aren't happy with the outcome of the election are in this sort of like,
which is many Oscar voters,
recoup space. And so that makes me wonder if instead of sort of like spiky resistance, we're looking for soothing, something that feels soothing and uplifting. And that's why I don't want to like jump ahead on things we want to talk about, but I will just say like briefly, I feel like the Wicked narrative has just like snapped into place. As part of that sort of like, let's all rally around something that makes us feel warm and happy and uplifted, which is not a knock on Anora or anything like that, but like all that stuff is more complicated than the more simplistic offering of something like Wicked. So yeah, if you asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have had a very different answer, but that's where I'm sitting right now. It feels like everyone I've talked to who is unhappy with the election results is seeking comfort.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I have Wicked on my list of critical items to discuss in this episode. I've since seen Wicked. I have not been putting Wicked on our trademarked Best Picture power rankings at all during this season. Part of that is a me problem, which is that I have not seen the stage musical Wicked. I have not read the novel. I am just Wicked blind. I was until I saw the movie.
Do you know the songs? They hadn't like penetrated through in your head?
I'm sure I had heard Defying Gravity in a Target at some point, like I'm sure that happened. But I since I had a kid and The Wizard of Oz became a big part of our life, Wicked became a part of my life through the soundtrack. And so she is really into those songs and is obsessed with The Wizard of Oz. We were just at the Academy Museum last weekend. We saw The Wizard of Oz there. We saw the Ruby Slippers. The Wicked conversation is happening in my home on a regular basis. But so I just saw this movie, and maybe we can talk about this first before we talk about the frontrunners, because I think you're onto something, Joe, and I've been trying to sort it out. I think there are some strong cases for Wicked, which is not out until November 22nd. And then there are some strong cases against it. So I want to kind of vet those with you guys. On the negative side, I don't know if people know this because it's not being marketed this way, but this is a part one of a two-part movie, which if you've seen the Mission Impossible trailer, you know that that's something that we're not that comfortable with anymore. If you saw the way that Dune was marketed and now Dune Part 2, we know that we're not rewarding movies for their first bite at the apple. That's been traditionally true throughout the history of Hollywood at the Academy Awards. And this is, I don't think I'm spoiling anything to say that this movie ends on a cliffhanger. It ends on a climactic moment, but it is the opposite of resolution. And that feels almost antithetical to the idea of movie storytelling. So do you think that'll be held against it in any way?
I mean, I think that's the argument we were making around Dune Part 2 at the beginning of the year, right? That this was that was the Two Towers. They have to wait for their Return of the King Part 3 moment. I think from what I haven't seen Wicked yet. I'm seeing it this Sunday. Though, anecdotally, it's kind of hard to get into a screening. They are so jammed and popular around here.
There's a song about being popular in Wicked. Maybe that's why.
Exactly. But part one of Wicked, if people are fans of the stage show, part one of Wicked has most of the good songs. And so I don't know that people should hold out for part 2 when it comes to awarding Wicked. There are some good Act 2 songs, but also it ends with, no spoiler, everyone kind of knows this, Defying Gravity is is the biggest song out of this huge musical. And it ends on this sort of soaring upbeat. So again, I haven't seen part 1 and there's definitely more to come, but I could see it being held against it in a different year, but given the lack of really strong frontrunner elsewhere, I don't know. I think it has an opportunity. What do you think, Katey?
I mean, I know smart people who think that Wicked is going to win Best Picture. The people who are more confident than I am in saying anything about what's going to win at this point, although I guess we'll get there. But I think the escapism thing is totally right. I think, Joanna, you're totally right that the Wicked thing has locked into place. I mean, it helps that they had their premiere earlier this week, I think right after the election. So the timing was good, whether they intended it or not. Reviews haven't actually come out yet. Those don't come until a couple days before it opens. So they're being very smart playing the social sentiment embargo game, much as Gladiator 2 did, except they've got all these influencers who went to this big fancy premiere and are thrilled about it. But I keep thinking about if Barbie couldn't get treated the way that it deserved to as escapist fantasy. Not just that Oppenheimer beat it. Oppenheimer was going to beat Barbie no matter what. But, things like the snubs for Best Director, the things that it didn't get credit for. Wicked could get in a lot of these ways, but to be a Best Picture winner, you kind of got to have that extra something. And I haven't seen Wicked yet either, so I don't know. I know it's about two women going up against a false male patriarch, the Wizard of Oz. So who knows? But I feel like escapism is only going to take it so far, and it's going to with the Academy that we have now, the Academy that voted for Moonlight. You need something else to get across the finish line.
Can I just say really quickly? I'm so sorry. This morning when I was thinking about podcasting with Katey again, I was like, I get to talk to Katey about Barbie, which I didn't get to talk about last year. But I wanted to talk to you because I was thinking about Barbie in the context of Wicked this morning as well as I was thinking about this. And it was making me kind of actually preemptively a little angry because as much as I think Wicked is snapping into place, and I haven't seen it yet, I was texting you a little bit this morning, Katey, John Chu's visual style is not my preferred visual style. And if you're going for sumptuous, girly pop, glorious Technicolor film, I would much rather a Barbie get this than a Wicked, again, sight unseen. Yeah. Or the fact that I have for over a month now been hearing Ariana Grande Oscar winner in a way that Margot Robbie couldn't get in the door is personally slightly aggravating to me. But that being said, I think because Wicked lacks like the America Ferrera overt feminist speech, it might be perhaps be a bit more palatable to the people who felt like Barbie was being preachy in a way that I didn't, but a lot of people did, you know? So
interesting.
If they're concerned about preachy, there's plenty of preachiness in Wicked, honestly.
Okay.
It's a pretty ham-handed metaphor for like accepting people who are different from you. This is a really tough one for me because, as I say, like I know that there are a lot of people in the Academy that have a lot of fondness for the Wicked stage musical, and that obviously it's been one of the most successful musicals of the 21st century. And so there's already, if you've seen it before or you're familiar with it and you go into it, there is a kind of comfort and then there is an expansion that the director, John M. Chu, applies to the story that is very effective. I thought Ariana Grande was incredibly enjoyable in this movie. Very funny, really elevated the material, I thought. I really enjoyed her, so I get where a lot of that sentiment is coming from. But man, in the history of Best Picture winners, there's not a lot of movies like Wicked. You basically have to go back to The Sound of Music to find a movie that has the kind of upbeat and color that this movie has. Now, it doesn't mean that other musicals haven't won, like Oliver won, Chicago won, but those are pretty grimy, dark musicals. And the
Even
Academy,
Moulin
especially,
Rouge is darker than what we're talking about.
Completely. I mean, think about the setting of that film. And so this would be extremely unusual in the history of the Academy. And if it did win, it would feel to me like the first part of our conversation, this kind of boomerang effect on what's happening in the real world is filtering into the conversation, because I don't think most people were taking this movie too seriously 2 or 3 months ago, and now it feels like it has been elevated significantly. I mean, for me, at the risk of spoiling my review, like I thought it was fine. I definitely don't think it's bad. It's not a disaster by any means. It's not really my flavor of stylized CGI. Like I have a hard time looking at that production design.
I agree.
But people really seem to like it. So if I'm on the other side of that, I'm okay with it. It is IP. It's not. This is not that different from Barbie and Marvel and Top Gun, and like it's an IP movie.
But to your point about taking your daughter to go see Wizard of Oz at the Academy Museum, it's IP with a connection to like old school Hollywood. So it feels like it's connected to the grand art of filmmaking, even though it looks, to my eye, as far away from the glorious Technicolor of the 39 Wizard of Oz as you can get. I don't get the John M. Chu aesthetic. I don't understand its appeal personally, but I'm hearing from a lot of people who have seen it that they, people who are in this sort of awards game, that they're like, oh, it's going to win every craft award. And I'm a little baffled by it.
God, the Dune Part 2 people are shaking their fit. I mean, I haven't seen Wicked yet, but like, the crafts in Dune, I feel like we're kind of waiting for them to like swing back around and win all the Oscars they did last time. And here this usurper comes around the bend.
That would be a strange and unfortunate outcome if Wicked swept all the crafts. But reasonable people can disagree about it. So it is a hopeful story about people standing up to power. It is a kind of a good moment for John M. Chu, who I think really sees himself in the mold of like a Spielbergian, like visionary type filmmaker who takes on big material. And I think often elevates it. Like I really liked Crazy Rich Asians. I think In the Heights is a little underrated. I definitely don't think he's a bad filmmaker by any means. I don't think he's Steven Spielberg though at all. I think if the Academy wants to try to elevate someone, there's an opportunity there with him. More than anything, the reason why I have been kind of flipped on this and starting to feel like it's going to get in there at least into the race is the telecast really needs a movie like this. When you look at the potential lineup, setting aside Dune Part 2, it is a deeply uncommercial collection of movies this year. And especially having now seen Gladiator 2 and being a little bit iffy on if that's getting in, I don't know, like we kind of need to see Defying Gravity on the telecast because I'm not sure who's going to tune in to watch this. Katie, what do you think?
They can't nominate Defying Gravity because it's not an original song. There are no original songs of Wicked. I do know that much, which is, there are some in the second part, I have been told, but it's fascinating to me that they did not. I think the story is that it's like, there's too much going on. We can't make room for it. I'm like, this is half of the show. How was there not room for something new? Anyway, they made choice. I might be higher on Gladiator 2 than you are, Sean. Maybe we can get to that later. I think you have to acknowledge like Anora's been making a ton of money and it's limited release. Conclave is out there making money, making memes. Like it's running hard there.
It's true.
But yes, I mean, Barbie and Oppenheimer, again, they set this a standard that's not going to be achieved. Like you're not going to get two giant billion-dollar movies. I guess Oppenheimer almost made $1 billion as major Best Picture contenders again for quite a long time, if ever. But I think the bigger thing that you had pointed out is that Wicked is hopeful. That has this like hopeful message at the end of it, and like there is hope to be found in all of these movies that I've got on, my list of things to consider, but ending on a hopeful note, ending on this idea of like we can overcome, like even Gladiator 2, like there's a lot of darkness tempering almost all of these. There's so much sadness to have to get through. So maybe that's just what we were saying about the escapism is like how much hope do we need to rally behind and how much can people, make themselves put up with the bad feelings you get in watching The Brutalist and vote for it anyway. That's what we don't know.
Can I ask you, Katey, a quick? Our old bosses, Vanity Fair, just put out their Hollywood cover, and there is a moment, and you've worked on it, and I've like worked on it slightly, very tangentially, but we've all sort of like been in that game for a long time, and every year there's someone missing from the cover that come January, February, we're like, why did we not put this person on the cover of the Hollywood issue? Who is that person, do you think? Because you and I think, both agree this is a great lineup.
Yeah,
on the
I think
cover of the
it is a
Hollywood
great cover.
issue.
They did a great
Wonderful
job.
cover.
Yeah.
We loved it. Yeah.
But so, I mean, I think part of the logic of printing it out in December this year, or November is the December issue, is kind of getting a little bit out of the Oscar hype scene. So like last year, Charles Melton's on the Hollywood cover and then he doesn't get the nomination for May December. Like it's fine. He deserved to be there. But, getting away from that part of it, these are all the hopefuls. I mean, you could say that Mike Weiss, if they're going to have Zendaya and Josh O'Connor on there, why not let Mike Weiss be part of the crowd? I mean, you could say like Kieran Culkin, I think may well win an Oscar this year, but should he have been on the Hollywood cover? I don't know. Carla Sofia Gascon, I think, is the actual breakout of Emilia Pérez. We'll talk about her in a moment, but Zoe Saldana's on there too. So I don't know. Maybe I feel like they got it right, Joanna. Who am I missing?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I just always love that moment, or there's always someone on there that we're like, ooh, we really thought you were gonna go and you didn't, So just something to think about. But it's it's a great cover and it includes people like Ncuti Gatwa or whatever that it's just sort of there and exciting, but not really necessarily in the Oscar conversation.
I mean, maybe Mikey Madison is the answer. It would surprise me if they had tried to get her or if that had not been part of the conversation. Again, I don't work there anymore, so I don't have insight into that. But she's kind of a big young breakout of the moment who is maybe notably absent.
Or to put Demi back on the cover when she did such famous Vanity Fair covers, you know what I mean? So
that's good thinking.
That's one of the. I mean, I don't have an instant recall on who's appeared on these covers in the past, but three people who crossed my mind were Margaret Qualley, Paul Mescal, and Mikey Madison. Those feel like three signature figures of the year in movies thus far. And they're not there. And, there's always booking concern too. And if Paul Mescal had been on in the past, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But
I should know.
I don't know. That was kind of a weird collection this year. It's Nicole Kidman is playing a part, but Harris Dickinson is not there. That seems odd given what Baby Girl is and kind of what's kind of come out of that. Whereas that movie feels like a continuation of what Nicole Kidman has been doing, but maybe a step up for Harris Dickinson in some ways. Nevertheless,
you need to have very famous people on the front panel. That's always the part of the math of making those. And our pal Glenn Powell getting bumped up
in the A position is
a
wild moment. Is a wild moment. That's like a Tom Hanks, Julia Roberts position, and there's Glenn Powell. So
we are so happy for Glenn here at the Big Picture. We always support him.
Sorry to derail your pod to talk about Vanity Fair covers, but no,
it's relevant because this kind of visibility it plays into what's going to happen here. Up until I saw Wicked, my sense of things was that Anora and The Brutalist and Emilia Pérez, which we'll talk about shortly, were the three frontrunners. Now, Katey, you pointed out that Conclave 1 has been doing great business, which is just very cool to see because it's almost exactly what I cry about on the show. And I'm like, we need more of this. We need more of this upper middle brow, mystery movie set in an interesting world with high-class actors. I fucking love that stuff. Same reason I love Juror Number 2, where I'm just like, man, more of this, more of the middle. But it is middle, and historically the Oscars are often rewarding the middle. So you could really see a case for a movie like Conclave, and it obviously has this political affectation. It's consistently pointing to its closeness to the American political system. So I could see that. So that's 4. And then if you add Wicked, that's 5. I'm not sure if I'm ready to add Wicked yet, to be honest with you, in terms of
Really?
the frontrunner conversation. I don't know.
Not at
I don't
all?
know. Well, I feel like a lot of the fervor that you're talking about with the difficulty of getting into screenings is like there is a rabid fan base around this kind of a movie, but there are rabid fan bases around Deadpool and Wolverine as well, and that film will not be competing. Like, I'm not totally sure that indicates that it is a Best Picture winner. Now, I could be totally wrong. I don't know.
No, it definitely doesn't. Attendance doesn't correlate to, but it helps. It's why Top Gun. You were able to talk about Top Gun Maverick as being in the race because we're like, it's good for business and we want to reward things that are good for business. So if Wicked is not just like, people who want to get into advanced screenings, but pre-sales on tickets have been bonkers bananas. So, it's like, it's going to make a ton of money. Maybe not Deadpool and Wolverine money. Maybe nothing can, but it's going to make a ton of money. And I think it's going to get that sort of cinema's back or Hollywood's back sort of narrative that we're constantly cycling back to when we talk about these things.
Yeah, something that assuages the fears of Hollywood about itself that can be like, oh, well, we can nominate this because it's making us feel good. Like Barbie and Oppenheimer did that. Top Gun Maverick and Avatar The Way of Water did that. I think Conclave can do that for exactly the reason you were just saying, Sean, that it feels like it's the kind of movie that doesn't get made at all anymore. Anora to some extent also, even though it's really not traditional in that way. I'm curious if The Brutalist fits into that because it's such a this young guy. I think of Brady Corbett as being this young filmmaker, even though he's very close to my age because we're all very youthful on this podcast.
And we look good too.
Exactly. Just someone following their passions, an exciting new voice. So there's a lot of narratives you can follow in that one for it. And I wonder if Wicked makes a lot of money, it can do that. If Gladiator 2 can the same way, but you kind of have to to fit into some spot to make Hollywood be like, okay, we haven't gone all wrong because Conclave exists.
Well, I don't know if this is the Gladiator 2 marketing team that has put this narrative out there, but all the tweets and blue skies and whatever I've seen comparing the first Gladiator's Rotten Tomatoes score to Gladiator 2's Rotten Tomatoes score and that they're comparable, right? And they were both in the 70s. And so a lot of people are just sort of like, okay, the classic what do the critics know sort of thing, but just basically this idea of don't count it out just because it's got 70 something in Rotten Tomatoes. If that is from the Gladiator 2 team, bravo, well done. But Sean, you and I both were bullish on Gladiator 2, and then I talked to you when you had seen it, and I got kind of deflated. I see it next week, but if it makes a ton of money, if it does, I think it could be in the conversation. And I don't think you have to have made obviously a ton of money. We're going to talk about you talk about Anora doing relatively well at the box office, but that's quite relative,
sure.
Right? But it has been interesting to me to hear this ongoing conversation we've been having about the Oscar telecast where we're they have to put in movie people have actually seen or have actual movie stars there or else no one's going to watch the telecast, something that all three of us go back and forth on this. I've heard all of us talk about this where we're they need to pander to people so more people will tune in, and then they go, well, fine, never mind, just make it super niche and just for the hardcore movie fans. That's fine. Who cares? But the not to hammer on poor Ariana Grande because I actually do think she should probably get nominated, but I will be distressed if she wins before some of the other actresses who are in contention. But I've been hearing the Golden Globes-esque narrative of we need to have Ariana Grande there so that people will come. And that's something we're used to hearing. We need to nominate Angelina Jolie for The Tourist so that she will come to our awards show. And I was why are we Golden Globesing the Oscars? So I don't know. That's where I am.
I guess I am interested to see if the Globes are more impactful. People have already been indicating that it's probably BAFTA that will be the most predictive this year, in part because of a number of the contenders and where they fit. The Gladiator 2 thing, I don't want to say too much about the movie. We'll be talking about it at the end of next week. And I said when I did the power rankings a month ago, just having seen it, it's just deeply iterative of the original on purpose with a less good script. And even though their Rotten Tomatoes scores may ultimately seem somewhat similar, I think with the exception of the Denzel Washington character, there's not it doesn't feel that different to me from the first film. So if just being reminded of the original is enough to muscle its way into the race, I guess that's something. But I can't say it lived up to where I wanted it to be.
I know.
I had a great time with Gladiator 2. I left on a real high out of that movie, including about Denzel Washington, who I do think is really in that supporting actor mix. Like, I would not
I
count
agree.
him out at all. I mean, the theory I had thrown out, and we're not talking about Best Director today, is like Ridley Scott still has no Oscar. And like, if you feel like, if you look at Sean Baker or Brady Corbett or Jacques Audiard, and you're like, none of them are really clamoring for an Oscar. Like, Ridley Scott's right there. But I think Gladiator 2 does need a bigger head of steam behind it before we can start really talking about stuff like that.
I agree. I would have been much more comfortable. I was very comfortable predicting him in Best Director 2 months ago before I saw it for that exact reason, Katie, which is it feels like an oddly, I don't want to say weightless, because that's not, I don't mean that the films are weightless, but I don't know if the Sean Baker or Jacques Audiard narrative are like, hey, these guys are overdue and it's time for them to compete. It doesn't really feel like that's quite in place. I look back at the rankings that I did on October 21st, and I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I was in a mono studio alone by myself.
Joanna and I were both marveling at how good you are at monologuing into a microphone.
We were listening to it this morning. We were just like, wow, Sean's really good at this.
Okay, that's nice. Probably some combination of paranoia and narcissism colliding to make that possibly successful. But I think actually, even if I sounded cogent, I don't think I did a very good job of outlining where the race stands. And I think there's a little bit of my personal taste has invaded, because seeing a movie like Anora, I've been a huge Sean Baker fan for a very long time. Seeing a movie like The Brutalist, which is kind of like vacuum sealed in a lab for my interests, it's just so close to the kind of thing that really moves me historically at the movies. Those two movies being so high up, I'm like, yeah, Nickel Boys should be getting in. This audacious, unusual reimagining of first-person point of view storytelling from a complex novel feels like something that matters. But then I look at it and I'm like, I don't know. It's going to take a lot for a movie like that to get over the line. And then is September 5th too simple? So I'm really I'm unsorted on where I think I stand. I'll just, for the sake of the listenership, I'll say here's where I was 1 month ago, and then we can talk about what we think is actually in right now. So it was Nickel Boys, September 5. The Piano Lesson, Gladiator 2, A Real Pain, Dune Part 2, Conclave, The Brutalist, Emilia Pérez, and Anora. And I don't feel great about anything other than the top 4 there right now. So what do you guys think?
Well, I was thinking, it feels unsettled. I agree that this feels more unsettled than usual because we don't have anything coming in as a real front runner. But like, this is always the vibes part of Oscar season. There's been the Gotham nominations, which gives us some information, but not that much. In December, we get Golden Globe nominations. We get SAG, Critics' Choice starts happening. Like, we get some better sense of what people are actually choosing. But when we sit there and we're like, well, I think older Academy voters will like Emilia Pérez, that's based on like, maybe you were at a regional festival screening. Like, there's not a lot of information to go on for any of this stuff. So I think it's only sensible to have this like kind of formless sense of like 20-ish titles that you think are in the mix, but like no idea how to sort them because we haven't been giving any data to work off.
Do you have a hobby horse right now, Katie? One that you're like, I feel like this is going in and no people aren't talking about it as much. Like, I know you talked about Sing Sing on your show a couple times, and I left it out last time, and that was probably easily the biggest blowback I got was like, where the fuck is Sing Sing, dude?
Yeah, that's the one I was going to bring up, like looking at my list and listening to yours. I was going to throw out Sing Sing, so we can talk about that too. But also Blitz is becoming a big hobby horse of mine. I mean, you just talked about how BAFTAs might wind up being predictive. Like, if you look at the reviews of Blitz from the UK, they are much more effusive than the ones in the US. I really loved it. I saw it. I had like left my children and come to New York to see a screening of Blitz, and I was like, this mother's been separated from her child, and it really, I was in the right spot for that. But I think in this post-elections period, like a story about people enduring really tough stuff and coming together, and specifically this multi-racial, multi-ethnic vision of London that has so rarely been on screen, like that has real power. It's an Apple movie. I don't even know what the box office is or if it's being reported. Like, that's always a weird asterisk on these things. But I think until proven otherwise, I feel like Blitz could have some power that's being underestimated right now.
What do you think, Joanna? And what did I screw up? What are you feeling is in the mix that I didn't identify?
Here's 2 things. Number one, and I understand why, and you and I are going to talk about it next week. I think you have A Real Pain way too high, I think.
Okay.
As like a film, the Kieran Culkin narrative, I understand, but like as a film, as a best picture film, that feels a bit high where you have it on the list. Not that it's not going to get in, but Sing Sing for me really is like genuinely, and I'm not just yes-anding. Katie got a text from me about this earlier, but I was just like, I used to do this thing on Little Gold Men where I would just like championing something that I feel like really emotional about. And Katie reminded me that they used to call it like the Joanna's Heart vote. And it's like Sing Sing for me. I I saw that movie at South by, and then I saw it again, at a local theater where a lot of actually awards voters go, and like the Academy members that were in the screening that I went to in the Bay Area really liked it. And I think not just because, I think the performances are quite good, all of that sort of stuff, but like that classic Oscar art is important. Theater is important, stories are important, acting is important, is inside the package of like a little film that could kind of story. So I don't know. I really feel I loved Sing Sing, and I feel like it has a real shot to be in the race.
Yeah, I had some regrets not including it. It's just so tricky because it's been such an odd release strategy. I guess A24 announced that they will be reissuing it in theaters either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year so more people can see it. We did an episode about it in August, and I was like, is this a good idea? It was one of like 9 episodes this year where I'm like, I don't know when people are going to see this. I don't know when to talk about this movie. I don't know when to talk about Anora. It's still only in 1,000 theaters as opposed to 3,000, even though it's doing pretty good business, as you pointed out, Katie. And so that's an unusual situation because in 21 and 22, I felt as though the hangover effect from the pandemic meant that a lot of films went to streaming pretty quickly. I remember the Banshees of Inisherin hitting Max really fast.
Yeah.
And feeling like, wow, that was a great move. Like that really helped the campaign because a lot of people saw that movie, a movie that otherwise would have been a fairly small film, and got excited about it. And I remember just like looking at the data on who was listening to that episode. I'm sure I've said this before, and I was like, wow, a lot of people listen to the episode about the weird Irish comedy drama from Martin McDonagh. And a movie like Sing Sing, it's like premiered at TIFF in September of 23, played South by in March of 24, opened on like 200 screens in August of 24, getting reissued in December of 24, and then making its way to the race. It's a very unusual kind of trajectory for a Best Picture nominee. So maybe that's kind of what's fogging my brain about that one.
I will say that's the closest we have to a Coda in terms of the pattern this year. Like Coda came out in the summer after its Sundance premiere. It really made like no splash at all. Everyone thought it was this nice movie that no one was ever going to talk about again. And it resurfaces partly in the power of a campaign, of having all of its cast go to all these events together. I feel like I talk about this all the time, but there's real power to that. And like Clarence Macklin and Coleman Domingo together is a powerful sight, along with, real people in the movie who were formerly incarcerated and more or less playing themselves. There's so much power in that too. And I think A24, are often smarter than we give them credit for. I remember when The Whale was coming out, it was just not on streaming, and everyone was wondering, what in the world are we doing? But it builds up. It doesn't have this moment of peaking to be like, oh God, I guess no one really wanted to see that movie. It just gets to roll slowly forever. Maybe that's part of the Honora strategy too. So I feel like Sing Sing, it just can't be written off yet as that movie didn't connect. Because Joanna, I've been hearing stories like what you said about Academy screenings since the summer. It plays so well in a room, and you get 10 people in one screening and 10 people in another one, and eventually you've got 4,000 people who've seen your movie, and you got a campaign there.
Okay, so tell me what movies you would knock off that I had on last time.
Okay. I'm trying to remember what you had on last time.
September 5?
September 5 I have questions about also that
just because not anything against the movie, just because I just am not feeling like the swell behind it, that you want at this point. So
it's not out yet, right?
It's out at the end of November.
Okay.
I don't know how wide that release is going to be. That is the kind of movie to me that if it were made available on streaming fairly quickly, I think would benefit it because it's a modest production. It's a men in rooms talking movie.
Yeah.
And obviously we have one of those in Conclave already this year.
Yeah, and Conclave is very polished compared to September 5, which is very well made, but not as flashy as Conclave at all.
It's definitely not as flashy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that there was something about, there's obviously the inherent complexity and difficult to discuss nature of the hostage situation in the real events of that film and how it reflects or doesn't reflect on what's going on in the world right now. And I don't know how much any of that will filter into the conversation around the film. I think it just kind of felt a little bit like a movie from the mid-'70s that people would be like, that's a great film about people doing the work and the paranoia inherent in the work that we do. And there might be a little bit of self-gratification around anybody in media taking a look at that movie and maybe misreading it about what it actually means. But we're not so far removed from a Spotlight Oscar, know? So it doesn't seem out of the total realm of possibility, but it's a smaller movie for sure. it's bigger than Sing Sing though.
And I say this as like a tangential member of the media, as like a big supporter of media. What is the national temperature on the media compared to when Spotlight came out?
What do you mean?
Things have gone great in the media in the last 10 years. What are you talking about?
Are we not stable in our careers?
Are we the
forevermore?
baddies? What are we saying here?
Guys, a cabinet position could be ours. So, just hold
I'm
fast.
not a journalist. I'm a content creator. So I don't know about you guys.
And the content
I feel
creators
great about
also
that.
having a great reputation these days too. No,
That's
I like
well, they
September
are
5.
influential.
I had the Spotlight thought also on September 5. It's less emotional than Spotlight. Like there's this very like straightforward people doing their jobs. Like you kind of get to the end of the movie and like the characters are all kind of more or less where they started. Like I love John Magaro. I think he's great in it. I think Peter Sarsgaard is really great in it. But there's not even like the, Mark Ruffalo yelling they knew all along moment in this. Like kind of the point of it is that they're keeping their heads down and like getting the job done in these crazy circumstances. And I wonder if that can work against it. Because Sing Sing is a smaller movie, but it's really emotional. And that can really pull people along with these smaller productions.
Okay, let's say for the sake of conversation that we're just putting Sing Sing in the 9 slot, replacing entirely September 5. Does that sound right to you guys?
It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
For now.
What are we doing with the piano lesson?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the piano lesson.
Well, it's clearly going to get at least recognition for Danielle Deadwyler's performance. I think you could make the case that she is in the top 2 or 3 in that race for supporting actress. To me, she's a lead, but that's neither here nor there. I don't really care about category fraud that much. I think at a time when I wasn't sure how movies like Anora and The Brutalist were going to resonate, I was like, this feels like an elevated version of a conventional movie that often gets awards consideration. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is an example of a movie like this, where I'm like, I think that Piano Lesson is superior to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom in a variety of ways, way more cinematic. But it is something that historically the Academy has clicked with. And so I don't know. I don't know how radical the Academy is or is not. And so I don't know what to make of that one. I liked it. I liked it out of Telluride. I don't think it's it's not my favorite movie of the year by any means, but it has a lot of the bones of things that have been nominated in this spot in the past.
I talked to Malcolm Washington and Danielle Deadwyler a little while ago and revisited the movie and was really taken with it the second go round, like having seen it in Toronto and was kind of too tired to engage with it properly maybe. I think Malcolm Washington is really smart and really good filmmaker. And kind of what I was saying before about Brady Corbett, like the idea that like, you get someone new, you get new talent. He's 33 years old.
I know. I had him on the show too. We haven't run that interview yet. And I was like, wow, this guy is incredibly impressive and cool.
Got it. Like it's not,
Yeah.
I mean, he has strong Hollywood connections because of the family he comes from, but like he has studied, he knows what he's talking about. And I think there's something really exciting about that. I agree, like it's better than Ma Rainey, and also there is a slot in Best Picture for something like that. But I can't figure out what to kick out for it. Like it's impressive, but are you going to get like? I think I'm higher on A Real Pain than Joanna. Like, yeah, I have it sitting on the outside of my list for kind of the same reason that I can't figure out what to do with it.
There's a part of me that wonders, and I'm less inside the game than I used to be, but it feels slightly outside the Oscar race game that like the power of Netflix to get something nominated is not as strong as there was a run where it really was. They had all these resources. They still do have a ton of resources, and they could get a ton of stuff nominated. And now it feels like they're being a bit more judicious. And I have been told by people who work at Netflix that they're throwing all of their stuff behind Emilia Pérez. And so I kind of feel
clear.
like,
yeah.
That's a does statement, but I've just been told that also by Netflix. And so it's like the piano lesson, there are previous years where Netflix could have upwards of like 3 or 4 Best Picture nominations, but like, I don't know if that's still the case.
I may be letting that infect some of my thinking too, is that, well, you can sort of count on 1.7 Netflix films making its way into the Best Picture race.
Yeah.
I think the Piano Lesson is the only film that they have in the race this year that is actually competing that originated at Netflix. Both Maria and Emilia Pérez were pickups out of festivals. And so historically, when they produce a movie too, they like to be behind it more. I think they obviously had fewer films in the pipeline for 2 reasons, I think. One, obviously the strikes, which made it more difficult. And 2, they've just de-emphasized this frame, this part of their strategy, which was a huge part of their strategy for many years, that that endless pursuit for the Best Picture win. If they get it for Emilia Pérez, like I might just quit podcasting. Like that will be so absurd relative to like what Roma was, or anyway.
Are you just gonna rewatch Mank and cry like that?
Well, I can't credibly tell you. I think Mank could have won Best Picture, but it was my Best Picture that very odd movie year. Okay, so I felt like Nickel Boy, September 5, and The Piano Lesson were the three that I felt the least confident about. It's why they were 10, 9, and 8 last time.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're taking The Piano Lesson off, is that where Wicked Part 1 is going?
Can I propose something else to add in without saying what to get rid of? But what about the substance? Are we thinking enough about the substance?
I'm glad you brought this up.
Okay.
Yeah, this is great.
Talking about making money, like it's like successful. It's like, again,
and
by
like,
movie standards.
Sticky in the culture in a way that like even some other more popular movies haven't been.
Yeah.
Okay. I would love if that happened. And I'm actually willing to swap out Nickel Boys for the substance at number 10 for the sake of good list making. Because I do think that there is a zeitgeisty thing. It's available to stream on Mubi now, and you can rent it on VOD, to my point about Banshees of Inisherin. It's a movie that more people can see, and it has clearly made way more money, I think, than Universal ever thought it could before they got scared and sold it to Mubi because they didn't want to be anywhere close to the content.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that movie quite a bit. And I am on a couple of text chains with a couple of Academy voters, and they fucking hated it. And people also hate this movie. Now, I really like it, but that level of vitriol. Now, I don't think anybody is putting The Substance at number 1 on their Best Picture voting ballot.
I doubt it. Yeah.
Maybe at 4, maybe at 7, but the people who hate it will not. It won't be getting any 8, 9, 10 votes. You know what I mean?
It'll just not be on their ballot whatsoever. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
So how much does that factor in?
No, and with the likability factor in terms of getting a Best Picture nomination is pretty well known. So that is a good argument. I mean, again, we're not talking about director, but Corley Farjad, like as a director candidate, I think is maybe being more underestimated than its Best Picture chances. But I do think it's hovering in there.
When you say, again, that you're on a text chain with several Academy voters, wonderful flex for me.
Did I use the word several? I don't know if I said several.
Emilia Pérez is also quite divisive.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you've got it all the way up at number 2 on your previous list. And so I'm not trying to take it off the list by any means, of course, not at all. But I think it's a little higher than I think the Academy voter, because there's, we always have to consider, of course, the older curmudgeonly Academy voter that we keep in our mind. And then, of course, as Amanda likes to remind us, the international voter is something to keep in mind as well. But and Sean, I told you this when I got out of my Emilia Pérez screening, the older Academy voters were like, well, that sure was a thing. It seemed to baffle them,
Yes.
So, I don't know.
I think I believe my self-quote about Emilia Pérez after I saw it at Telluride was, well, that is a lot of movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I said much more about it. We'll get into that very briefly when we get into Emilia Pérez. Okay, let me raise one more. I like the idea of the substance. Great call, Katie. We'll put it in there for the sake of conversation. Sing Sing will be at 9. Is A Complete Unknown on your radar?
I have that on my list of, I haven't seen it. I know a handful of people who have.
I'm seeing it next week.
Okay. Yeah,
what have you heard from the people who've seen it? Katie?
That it is okay, but I was honestly, one person was just like, you're gonna hate it, which was surprising to me because I have felt kind of generous toward it. But the same person reminded me that Ford versus Ferrari got 10 Oscar nominations,
it did
not that long ago, and
damn good movie.
And A Complete Unknown could be just hitting right down the middle. We've been talking about the middle and how the Oscars like to live in the middle, and maybe A Complete Unknown, it's not going to do Wonka numbers, but it could do adjusted Wonka numbers opening in December and be the moneymaker and the middle thing that we're looking for.
Now you know why I podcasted with Katie for so long, because she brings up Wonka. I was going to bring up Wonka. I was going to bring up Wonka and say, I think we should stop ever underestimating Timothée Chalamet. So,
I'm in a complicated state.
I know A Complete Unknown is going to mean a lot to you one way or another, right? It's not, you're not going to be neutral on this movie.
No, I'm going to come down. Well, I like Mangold. I really do. He's been on the show.
Me too.
I find him to be a fascinating orator. I think we spoke for an hour and I asked 3 questions last time he was on the show. And he's got really, really strong ideas. but he does have a kind of traditionalist streak in what he pursues and what he believes is great cinema. Whether or not that transfers to the most mainstream artist who broke the conception of mainstream in American popular music history, like I'm not sure if that's a match. So I'm skeptical.
Why do you think so few people have seen it?
I was told that there were reshoots and that it wasn't done.
Yeah, I had kind of gotten that sense that they hadn't finished it yet. And also, like, they're going to wait and for the, like, Gladiator 2, Wicked, like, Moana 2, like, there's this huge, like, Thanksgiving jam up. And they're going to, like, screen it when they can I think there's going to be screenings on the 25th, so pretty soon, for, like, the critics who vote in New York Film Critics Circle and LAFCA, so they can get those votes out and then, bring it out to people. Because you want that, like, late mover advantage that, we've all said exists since $1 Million Baby. And more often than not, like, it doesn't really pan out that way. But I think every year there's something that tries. Like, maybe we could talk about Nosferatu, also kind of barely peeking its head out at this point.
I would love to do that.
Sean's face when you said Nosferatu.
Did my eyebrows go straight up?
Wait, Katie, when you say Nosferatu, who's the person in Nosferatu you most want to champion, just like theoretically?
Well, I haven't seen Nosferatu yet, so I feel like
but just theoretically.
I don't think my answer is Lily Rose Depp, but I got to remember who else is in Nosferatu, so I'm going to Google it real quick. Who are you championing? It sounds like you have an answer.
No, I just think that you, like me, agree that Nicholas Hoult deserves more.
I had to just basically confirm that Nicholas Hoult was in this movie before. Yes, Nicholas. I haven't seen Juror number 2 yet, though, so I feel like my Hoult card is going to get revoked until I go see that.
So there's 3 more movies that have not come up in this conversation that I think we should talk about. There's Nosferatu, there's Juror number 2, the twin killing from Nick Hoult, and The Room Next Door, which is the new Almodovar movie. Have you guys seen The Room Next Door?
Yeah, I saw it in Toronto.
Not.
Okay. I would say I was lightly dismayed watching that movie as a mega Almodovar fan, like a fanboy. It's a movie that didn't work for me, but I know it's another fairly divisive film. But that movie and Nosferatu and Juror number 2 are movies that I was maybe not taking as seriously as I should, and now I feel like maybe I need to throw them in the mix too. So maybe, Joanna, if you're right that A Real Pain is not contending in the way that I think it is.
Ooh, I'm more with you on A Real Pain.
Katie disagrees.
Yeah,
so,
I think A Real Pain's pretty strong.
I do too. I really like it.
I think it should be in there. I just think you have it too high. But I think
maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Nosferatu I have seen. I'm no longer doing the Nosferatu parentheses Eggers, 2024 close parentheses colon an absolutely beautiful film for all the sickos out there. Like, I'm not doing those tweets anymore. I've sworn them off. But
do you want to try that on Blue Sky?
Maybe I'm over there if people want to check that out.
Is it a beautiful film for the sickos though? Is this the exclusive we get on this podcast?
Yeah. It's Eggers at a mega budget doing the thing that he does. A very, very funny movie, I thought. And I think it's like sense of humor and sense of doom and the collision of those two things is something that really speaks to me, but it does not at all seem... It's another movie that would be wildly unusual for a movie like this to be nominated for Best Picture.
Were you at the event with Eggers and Guillermo del Toro?
I was, and it was one of the absolute best post-screening Q&As I've ever seen. It was... Del Toro is obviously a genius when it comes to film history, but the two of them who were doing shorthand on the history of myth, it was fascinating. Maybe not all people would agree, but for somebody like me, I was enraptured by their conversation.
Yeah. And I think if that's like the conversation that continues around that film, I'm excited for the sickos to have their day because they deserve it.
That is the vibe I've been getting from people who've seen it is like, I love this movie, but like The Lighthouse was in there for its Oscar contention for, got that cinematography nom, but like, it seems like that may still be the ceiling on what Robert Eggers is throwing down. And like, God bless him. We want him to keep doing that and not go for Oscar glory instead.
I wouldn't totally write off Lily Rose Depp. She is the standout performer from the movie by far for me. And she does some things. There's been some reporting about kind of like the physical performance that she gives, the way that she sort of contorts her body and the fact that no CGI was used to capture all of those things. That is very impressive and I think will be a talking point up to the release. I'm very curious to see if that movie does good business, because if it does, I think its chances in other categories goes up. Costume design, makeup it's definitely competing in makeup when you see what the Skarsgård transformation is. Anyway, I don't think Nosferatu is going to get in. Juror number 2, I'm not ready to write off yet.
I'm fascinated by it because
how much of that is the is the like justice for Clint narrative.
I think it's all
that's been
that.
Stick
bubbling.
it to
Yeah,
David
yeah,
Zaslav.
I think it's entirely
energy.
that thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's a very solid film. It's like a 7 out of 10 for me. But I think there is a little bit of a like justice for Clint thing, which is ironic just given how Clint sees the world and how he fucking hates institutions, and the idea of like an institution granting him yet again another award identifying his genius is a bit silly. But it's the same thing as Conclave. It's an old-fashioned down the middle genre movie with very good performances and some flaws in the storytelling, I think, but a great ending. And so if you told me that in 4 months it's a big part of the conversation, I wouldn't be shocked.
Would it be like, do you imagine it being like a best director, best picture thing? Like, is Nicholas Hoult more of a contender? Like, how across the board a rise up do you see on this?
I don't see Nicholas Hoult competing, even though it is a very, very good performance. I'm sorry, Joanna.
Sean just doesn't properly respect Nicholas Hoult, and that's okay.
No, I do. I like him quite a bit. He's just the king of all cucks, and he's having one of the great cuck runs in these 2 films. When you see Nosferatu in Juror Number 2, you'll know what I mean.
Wow. Sean texted that to me, and I was like, "No way, he's going to say that on the podcast." And then that's why you're one of the greats.
You
Sean.
don't underestimate him.
Thank you.
Can I throw out another? You listed 3. There's one more we haven't talked about that I
Please,
think we can miss. I don't know how I feel about it, but The Wild Robot is still out there, making money.
Yeah.
It is, when I was talking to somebody about, post-election vibes, like what's the movie about people like coming together and like making the world better. It's about animals, but it is a very great, like everyone team up to stand up for your values kind of movie. It's not as successful as Inside Out 2. Nothing is. And Inside Out 2 is going to push really hard to take that one animated spot. Like, I think everyone's correct that not both can get in. I think it's really crowded for The Wild Robot to make its way in there, but like, I don't know. It still feels like it's gonna fight hard for that spot until it runs out of road, I think.
It's still not since, is it Toy Story 3 was the last one to get into Best Picture?
Yeah. There was just this very quick run of Pixar movies, and then they said, nope, we're done with that. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Never again.
I really like The Wild Robot. I don't see it getting over the line. I'm not. I think it's a very good film. I think it's a very powerful film if you're a parent.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know, that this feels like actually all of a sudden it just feels really crowded to me.
I know.
We're like Sing Sing and A Complete Unknown and The Room Next Door and Blitz. And I'm like, they could all get in. That seems totally plausible to me that all of those movies could get in. So, okay.
Well, when you did your list of 26 in October 21st, how many movies are we at now? Are we at like 16? Have we narrowed it down a little bit? Okay.
Yeah, I think we're at about 16.
I know we're going from the bottom-ish, but I think that's how I usually like to do this, but should we do some top-down stuff just to make sure we don't run out of essential spots?
As always, you're way ahead of me on all this, Joanna. Thank you. You're right. Do you guys agree that Honora is still the front runner in this race?
Yeah. I do. I kept waiting for something to replace it, and I'm now starting to wonder if it just does a Nomadland and just stays there. Just the whole time.
In August, I came out of the screening and I was like, this movie's going to win. And I still kind of think that.
Yeah.
But Nomadland is such a baffling year to
that year is an impossible
it's
an impossible comparison, but like yeah, I know Honora's, it's so strong. And I talked to Sean Baker yesterday and some of his production team and was like just left even more dazzled. So presumably anyone who goes to a Q&A with them will do the same thing.
I never would have guessed that on all the times that I've spoken to Sean Baker in the past. I'm like, he's emerged as the darling of this award season. It's so strange. That's not a negative read. It's just weird.
But like Neon is good at what they do, right?
They are.
Like,
They
so.
Okay, so Honora is 1. What is number 2?
I have Conclave at 2 for my list.
Love the boldness.
I love it.
What do you think, Joanna?
I like it.
Did you like Conclave?
I really liked Conclave.
You did?
So over on Trial by Content, we're doing 3 weeks of Denzel Washington. And to your point about like, I miss movies like this, like watching Philadelphia and The Pelican Brief, I was just like crying. I'm like, why don't we have these movies that make $200 million anymore? Anyway, so that's, yeah. Let's champion Conclave.
I was informed by Dave Gonzalez, your co-host, that both Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow were in The Pelican Brief. So
Correct.
it was like a pre-Conclave right there.
Correct.
Oh, good point. That had not occurred to me.
Yes.
The only thing that would have made Conclave better is if Denzel showed up. That would have been quite special.
You could
Right.
absolutely fit him in there and give him like
Julia? Is there room for Julia in there? Okay, just wondering.
You don't know what those nuns look like under those habits. She could have been scuttling around serving lunch.
There you go.
Given the ongoing success and the fact that those movies are out in the world, I like Honora and Conclave at 1 and 2 right now.
Mhm.
So then, have you guys seen The Brutalist? You've seen it, Katie.
Yeah. Sean, I think you and I
haven't seen it,
are
Joanna?
on the Brutalist, hype squad together.
We are, okay.
A24, if you're listening, I'm really sorry I missed my first screening. I'm seeing it next week. A24. I'm so sorry. And I'm excited to see it. I think
Is it at number 3? Am I like overstating it?
I think you guys should put Brutalist at number 3.
I have it at number 3.
You guys both really love it. Do
Okay.
it.
I like not to like go back to the election thing over and over again, but I do think that's a movie that's like been rattling around in my head even louder since the election. Like I think that image of the upside down Statue of Liberty on the poster, like it is really striking. And I think it's just an incredible work of art. And it's got a lane, right? Like it's not really that much like Honora or Conclave. And I think you need that variety in a Best Picture lineup too.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's also the movie that it reminds me a lot of Tar. You know, it's a movie that is built around a mega central performance that is loaded with all of these ideas. And if you take those ideas out, great. And if you don't take them out and you just see it as spectacle, that's also going to work for you.
Does the 3.5 hour runtime, so much so that they put an intermission in the press screening that I am so sorry I missed. Does that factor into it when you're thinking about people watching their screener at home?
Watching this on a screener sounds like a terrible idea. And I don't know how they can't prevent people from doing it. But I don't imagine. Remember how Joanna Mike Hogan used to always say, like, imagining people in their Bel Air mansion with the sun streaming through their giant windows watching these movies at home? Conclave's going to rip like that. And The Brutalist is absolutely not.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so torn on that. I mean, on the one hand, Oppenheimer was 3 hours, you know, and Oppenheimer obviously was a big hit. So people just saw it in the theaters. But I wouldn't recommend seeing that movie on a screener either, but it absolutely dominated award season from start to finish. So I don't think that necessarily disqualifies. The intermission, as I understand it, is a part of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally baked into the movie, and there is a title card that appears that shows you that it's not like you're just at a road show and they only share it with you when you're seeing it in this format. I think when you buy the movie on digital or whatever, you're going to just have the intermission. I could be wrong about that.
Let's all go to the lobby and have ourselves a snack.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're
the countdown clock, it's it's a beautiful title card at intermission.
But historically, in great long, Hollywood epics, the reason for the intermissions that were baked into those movies was obvious. It was get up, go to the bathroom, go get a snack, go get some more popcorn. That was very purposeful. It was part of the exhibition of the film.
I'm not upset that it exists. I love that. When you're watching an old school epic on AMC or TCM or whatever, and then the intermission comes up in the middle, it's incredible. It just surprised me in a press screening because there was just a note in my press screening that there will be an intermission. I was like, that I've never experienced. So,
I was so relieved. I had to get up and stretch my legs. But also, there's this great moment, Sean, it might have happened to you, where I was sitting next to Joe Reed, and we turned to each other, being like, "Do you love this?" And we could check in with each other at an intermission, and it was just such a great oh my God, fun. You guys, we're doing this together. It's such a great feeling.
I had the same thing. I saw it in LA, and I was sitting next to Glenn Whipp from the Los Angeles Times, and we both were like, man, I hope this is as good as I hear it is. And it's kind of been a wonky year, and I haven't really been able to kind of get my heart behind too many movies. And then same thing, Katie, maybe not quite at the end of the first half, I was like, hey, we got one.
Great. Brutalist at number 3. Let's do it.
Okay, Brutalist at number 3. Number 4. Joanna, what do you think? What if I've overestimated A Real Pain? Have I underestimated anything? Is there something that should be shooting up closer to the top?
Well, the only thing I mean, we do have to put Emilia Pérez on here eventually, but I'm wondering if Dune Part 2 goes at 4.
Wow.
And then Emilia Pérez at 5. What do you feel like this? What is the late in the day Dune Part 2? All I'm seeing, I'm being constantly invited to screenings with Denis Villeneuve is going to be there. Denis Villeneuve is screening this movie every single night.
The most tireless man in the world.
Some city in the world. Denis Villeneuve is showing Dune Part 2. So how effective is this
I'm doing a
end-of-year
live
way
event
for
from Arrakis with the new actor, which I'm really excited about. A sand pod.
The flight's going to take forever, but it's worth it.
Oh my God. The wind sound, getting the wind sound out of your pod is going to be really tough. But
Sorry,
good luck.
Bob. Apologies.
Sorry, Bobby.
That feels a little high for me.
Okay.
I think that the movie is beloved by those who love it, but amongst the Academy, I think there is still a little bit of like, that's a movie for the nerds sensation.
Really? Okay.
It's maybe not as.
I thought it had broken through more than Doom Part. Like Doom Part 1, there was that sort of like, this is for the nerds vibes. And I thought Doom Part 2 had broken through, but maybe that was just because we walked out of our screening and like everyone in our screening, Sean liked it. And we all looked at each other across the nerd pods and the big pig pods and found common cause together in Doom Part 2.
Yeah. I don't, Katey, I'd be curious to know what you think about this. Amongst cinephiles, Denis is someone who now everyone is like, he's entered the pantheon, right? He's somebody who every time he makes a movie now, it will be a kind of event. It's been this slow build through American productions. And everyone identifies him as like a grand scale master movie maker. But science fiction has very little footprint in the history of the Academy Awards. It's just not a genre that, unless a film is an absolute sensation like Star Wars, that it tends to get into these races. So even more so than like fantasy, fantasy has a better track record even than science fiction for the most part. So while I think it is definitely going to be nominated and is widely admired and was a huge box office hit, I don't see it as like really competing for a Best Picture win. What do you think, Katey?
I'm going to make a proposal. I feel like it might perform exactly the way as Avatar: The Way of Water, in that it was a sci-fi sequel, it's like highly respected on every technical level, following up a movie that had been a pretty major Oscar player. And I don't remember how many nominations. I don't think it won anything, or maybe it only won visual effects. It gets in and nominated in kind of all the places it needed to be. And then everyone kind of just said, okay, good, you're here. And now we're going to go focus on other stuff. Like maybe that's a trajectory for Doom Part 2.
Tough room. Okay.
You know how much I love Avatar, Joanna. I consider that a high compliment.
Dune Part 1 did win 6 below the line Oscars.
It did. It sure did.
So, and I'll be curious to see if it can match that. My impression, my instinct would be to put it more around 6.
Okay.
Dune Part 2. Will you
accept
bargain with me on that?
I feel good about that. I had Emilia Pérez here at number 4, which I don't want to go to the mat for, but just to.
I think that's fine.
I do too. Is it crazy that Wicked Part 1 would be at number 5?
No.
No. I feel like it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say put Sing Sing there, like the way I made my list, but that's not based on anything. Like, and I think that in this moment, like if we're trying to capture not only what we think is going to happen, but where the energy is right now, it's Wicked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then we have 7 and 8.
Oh my God.
Thus far, we have knocked off Nickel Boys, September 5, The Piano Lesson, Gladiator 2.
We simply must put A Real Pain at 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it goes down one slot, so you can feel like you've had a victory of a kind here.
I made a difference.
Yeah, I feel really confident that A Real Pain is getting in for Best Picture.
Yeah. Just where,
So at number 8.
Oh my God, we're running out of room.
Just Gladiator 2, very quickly, Katey. Do you think it's going to get into this race?
I had said yes when I made my list, but like I feel like with Gladiator 2 and Dune Part 2, there can only be one. Like maybe that's not right, but maybe like Wicked, Gladiator 2, Dune 2. I don't know that there's room for all 3. So if you're going to keep Wicked and Dune 2 on there, then Gladiator's got to go.
I think right now so here's what I know about Gladiator 2. I haven't seen it. People are mixed excited about it, but not overly excited about it. Chris Ryan and Sean Fennessey, the 2 people that I thought would be most in the tank for Gladiator 2, are not in the tank for Gladiator 2. I think Denzel is the Oscar conversation and Best Picture is not.
Yeah.
That's what I think. So
then is Blitz going in this spot?
I think Blitz deserves a spot in here. Like that is a huge technical achievement. It's got all that, the below the line support like makes a difference in Best Picture. Those people are all voting for Best Picture. Like if you get all of the like sound editors in there, they're going to see something in Blitz that not necessarily we're going to. And there's the international component. Like it's not all English people, but like I feel like there's like a European fan base for that movie that's maybe harder for us to see. And I really like it. So just personally, I want to push for it to be in there.
I think that's insightful. I was a little disappointed with this, to be honest with you. Another movie that I felt like its script did not quite live up to some of the technical mastery and performance on display. And that was kind of a bummer because I tend to really love the scripts of Steve McQueen films because he has a real acid burn sensibility that I really connect with, whether he's making something historical or more genre based. At times I was like, this is very Spielbergian as well, and very kind of, it was heartful and open and emotional, which is not a bad thing per se, but it's not quite what I expect from him. Also, I think the first 5 minutes of that movie, without spoiling it, is a real fake out about what kind of a movie it's going to be. Because it has this kind of like stunning, dramatic sequence of what was happening during the Blitz in London and kind of like what the on-the-ground experience of it was like that the movie mostly doesn't follow. It becomes much more this sort of like Dickensian story of a child in a level of escape, as opposed to this like literally your city is on fire and here's how it feels. And so maybe I got a little bit pushed off of it. But I think you're right, Katey, that there's something about the international nature of the Academy and the framework. And also, World War II movies have a long history at the Academy Awards. And so I could see it. I don't know, Joanna, you haven't seen it yet?
I haven't. I do think that like Steve McQueen in general, of course, is like of interest to the Academy. And then Saoirse, this is my way too online opinion, but Saoirse on the press circuit for this film has been strong. Very strong.
It feels like the momentum from she's definitely getting in for the Outrun has now fully shifted to she's definitely getting in for Blitz and not for the Outrun.
I really liked her in the Outrun too, which is I drafted
another movie whose script I did not like. I'm sorry,
no, it's not the strongest script in the world. I think she's wonderful in it. I have it in my movie fantasy league, so I have a strong rooting interest.
You have a vested interest in it.
It's as if there's real money involved, but there absolutely is not. But yes, I think she is really good. She's been good on the Blitz press tour. She and like Elliot Heffernan, who's the main kid, like they're a good duo doing the press together. And I was going to say, I feel like Dickensian more than Spielbergian is a way to get into Blitz without sounding too much like a proper English major. But and I think that works in its benefit. But I absolutely see if you're coming in for one Steve McQueen and you get a different one, why it would throw you off when you first watch this movie.
Is having not seen it, is Empire of the Sun like a good comp to it or not?
I've never seen Empire of the Sun.
Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways they're similar. I don't know if Elliot Heffernan has quite what Christian Bale had in that movie, personally. But
high bar, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I need to watch Blitz again. Is what I'll say, especially before I do an episode about it, to just kind of wrap my head around it, because it wrong-footed me. It was just not what I expected it to be for a variety of reasons. That doesn't mean it's not accomplished or competing here. I've never been more flummoxed by the Best Picture race than I have in this year.
Fun. That's so fun, John. It's so
is.
boring when we're like, we know who all the nominees are.
I know. The Oppenheimer thing was a snore. That was really quite dull.
No,
honestly.
but like,
even though I like that movie.
Emotionally satisfying for you,
Yeah. Well, he was a great man,
Right.
Okay, so then our official rankings.
Wait, was that 10? Are we done?
Yeah.
We're done.
Oh my
We've
God.
got 10.
We kicked out Nickel Boys. Oh man. Okay.
We kicked out Nickel Boys. We kicked out September 5. We kicked out Piano Lesson. We kicked out Gladiator 2. I predict Nickel Boys will make a comeback.
Yeah.
Nickel Boys, and I also think there is a very strong case for Ramel Ross in director. And some of that will be relative to whether there's European representation, or whether like a Corley Farja or Audiard gets into that category. If they do not, there is a place for a... Nickel Boys is the most directed movie of the year. It is very much a vision. And so we'll see on that, but we'll wait because the movie's not even out for another month. And then then, I think it's going to be a fairly limited release.
The Zone of Interest Jonathan Glazer comparison on that, I think, holds very strong. So, yes.
Precisely. Number 10, The Substance, which I just love that we're putting it on. I don't know if it's going to last through the season, but I like that we're doing it. Number 9, Sing Sing. Number 8, Blitz. Number 7, A Real Pain. Congrats, Joanna. Number 6, Dune Part 2. Number 5, Wicked Part 1. Number 4, Emilia Pérez, which we will speak about momentarily. Number 3, The Brutalist. Number 2, Conclave. And number 1, the frontrunner in the race, Anora. So let's talk about Emilia Pérez. Okay? It's on Netflix. boy, people seem to not like this movie. Have you been seeing the Letterboxd reviews and the tweets and the cutting out the scenes from the film? And it's divisive.
This is like watching the Emilia Pérez clips be ridiculed on social media is giving me such strong A Marriage Story flashbacks. Remember? Like Netflix is like lives and dies by the memes that come out of their movies. And like, I liked this movie. I was captivated by this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was never a moment where I could predict what would happen next. You know, it's got like a telenovela plot. And as a huge musicals fan, I was really intrigued by it as like a musical property. But given that it's based on an opera, like it is much more operatic in that we're singing through dialogue rather than like having big musical numbers with a few exceptions, like Zoe Saldana-centric exceptions. But yeah, what a movie this is that I saw in the theaters. and I'm glad it exists. I'm really, really glad it exists. That's something I'll say.
I will say the clip that when I first saw the movie, I saw this scene of the musical number set in the surgery wing and saying, "Oh God, that's going to go viral on Twitter and people are going to get really mad about it." And that is exactly what has happened. Like it is very easy to spot when you're watching this movie that out of context, it reads crazy in context. Like that specific musical number where you have Zoe Saldana in a gender reassignment clinic in Switzerland or something, is wild when you're watching it. It's not like the movie makes any of that seem any less crazy. But when you're sitting down for all these big swings and you're watching them on top of each other, I do think there is a coherent's not the right word because I do think it's all over the place and I think that's part of the appeal of it, but there's a vision to it. There's a reason that all this is happening. It all fits as part of a whole. And like, I think Zoe Saldana, she's the best in show in the movie for me. Like she's understanding the world that this performance is existing in really well. And it starts off with another musical all around her kind of set in the streets of Mexico City that's a lot more grounded.
That was my favorite.
Yeah. It's really good. And she has the one at the gala later where she's dancing on the tables. She's a great dancer. She always has been. So yeah, all the pieces don't necessarily fit perfectly together, but I hate the like experiencing it out of context. Even if that particular musical number, and where this movie lands in its politics, like is absolutely up for consideration. But I think people need to see the whole thing before they can, decide that this is so offensive to their sensibilities that they don't want to watch it.
I'm sorry, it's not like a perfect comp to A Marriage Story, but it drove me absolutely up the wall. When people took that Adam Driver screaming scene out of context, I was like, inside the movie, this works very well.
I was devastated by that, but much more so than anything in Emilia Pérez for me, which I'll put a little bit of context around the film. So it is written and directed by Jacques Audiard. It is roughly based on an opera. It stars Zoe Saldana, Carla Sofia Gascon, Selena Gomez, Edgar Ramirez, a handful of others. It won the jury prize at Cannes in May. Audiard, this is his 10th feature. He is an icon in France. He is an occasional interloper with American audiences. A Prophet was nominated for International Feature in 2010. I still think that's his best film. It's a film that is somewhat similar, but also wildly different. I think he tends to shift pretty dramatically in tonality, but the way that he expresses his stories and the way that his characters express is always very big. He is a maximalist filmmaker. Rust and Bone is a very maximal film. The Sisters Brothers is a quiet movie, but it's a very big movie. And I'm always kind of interested in what he's doing. I think this movie is ultimately a failed experiment. It's cool that he tried it. If he didn't have Zoe Saldana, I don't think the movie would have worked at all. She really, every time it's working for me, she's in the frame. It's not, which is not a criticism of Carla Sofia Gascon, who I think has an incredibly challenging role here, playing both a pre-transition man and also a post-transition woman. And there has been some debate about rendering those two things and this sort of like going back in time, going forward in time, and what the sensitivities are around that. I don't claim to be an expert on this topic. If someone is deeply offended by it, I understand. I think she has a big challenge, and the film is not well written enough to kind of pull off that aspect of the story for me ultimately. And I also thought Selena Gomez was not good. And
agreed.
She obviously is going to draw a lot of attention to this movie, but she feels way out of her league relative to the other two central performances. So for me, because of that, it's super mixed. All the time when you're watching, it takes you out of the movie when the energy is shifting every 8 minutes on what kind of a movie it is. And so I struggle with that a bit.
I also I thought Selena Gomez was extremely distracting, and that's a kind of character that I love, and I really wish I could have seen someone who was like more up for it.
The salty ex-wife.
Like
What's the
the hot mess express.
Oh.
Like she's just like a hot mess express, and I love that kind of character. And I just think Selena Gomez, despite her obviously like musical talent, was just like not up for this gig. I'm baffled by Edgar Ramirez being here in such a small quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's such a weird deployment of Edgar Ramirez. And I liked Carla Sofia Gascon, I think, a bit better than both of you. But I will say, I think the height of it was the dinner where she first reveals herself to Zoe. And I was like on the edge of my seat.
I agree. That scene, that scene is great.
Great scene.
I was just like enthralled by it.
Yeah.
And I like enthralled by both of them. And I just like, this again, I want this movie to work better than it does. And I am so glad when someone who has big ideas tries something.
Yeah.
And so then there's going to be like parts of this movie that I'm going to remember forever. And then there's going to be parts of this movie that my brain is just going to let go of. And that's sort of how I feel about it. So
I do like Carla a good bit, actually. And I interviewed her a while ago, and she's such a bubbly, lively person to talk to. So I was just, at that point, right after Toronto and Telluride, I was like, oh, get her in a room with voters and they're going to lose their minds, because she's such a fun person to talk to, and really different from this very reserved character that she's playing on screen in both iterations. Her singing is not, she would say, the first person to say she's not like the strongest singer. So like it is tricky when these songs are not like super traditional, like sung songs. I can't really hum any of them, and like giving them to various people's voices is more of a challenge. But I agree with you on that scene, Joanna, where, she and Zoe Saldana sit at the dinner table, and the drama of that, the way the lights cut out, the way they start singing, like that's what you get when this movie is such a weird experiment. So like you're going to have to get that, and then you're also going to get songs that like don't work nearly as well, and that's the buy-in. And so even though I was buying in with it like you were, whenever anyone says like, oh my God, I couldn't stand a minute of it, I'm like, okay, I respect that. Like I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't come out on that. I didn't despise the movie or anything like that. I think it is really trying to do something that has essentially never been done in terms of the multi-layering of story types and the shifting of tone so dramatically over and over again. I just think it's a really messy stew. It's like, putting cinnamon in salsa. It's like these things they don't go together, and
now I want to try that though.
Yeah. I think I was constantly kind of bumping on the movie, where I was like, man, okay, I'm in the middle of a movie where someone's trying to do something weird in a movie. And so I feel it's kind of a difficult thing to talk about, because what I don't want to do is like discourage somebody from trying to expand what the movie form is, like what movie storytelling can be. I think it's not one or two, but like 3 or 4 super complicated ideas, social ideas that are coursing through the world right now. In particular, there's something very messy about the back half of the movie, where Carla Sofia Gascon's character has this kind of epic realization when she is handed a missing poster about the destruction that has been wrought upon Mexico by cartels and cartel violence, and all of the missing children, the vanished people and women of the country. And so she decides to start like an NGO in which she attempts to kind of save or do justice by this problem that she is manifestly responsible for as a former.
But I love that, right? That's so that she has this like saintly redemption arc, and then when she is challenged inside of her own house by Selena Gomez's character, the sort of the nasty crime boss side of her is just right under the surface and comes right back up, and so it's like it's so messy. But I like, you're watching it and you're watching it's very like Eva Peron. Like it's very like the hypocrisy of it is astonishing. And then she has this like other love story, and you're sort of like, do you get to have this based on all these other things that you've done? And then when she sort of reveals that this other part of her, not gender wise, but like personality wise, is still like right there under the polished surface, I found that really powerful inside the movie. So
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's just like it felt like a strain in the storytelling that only people who have money can fix problems, which I kind of hate. I think is like kind of gross and feels like, Jacques Audiard's a very elevated artist. He's the son of a filmmaker. He lives in a very rarefied status, and it feels like a very unexamined idea to me, especially because this figure at the end of the film is celebrated as this kind of icon of justice.
Literal icon, yeah.
Which it all felt a little bit wrongheaded to me. So maybe you're right. Maybe it is more complex, and the sort of like the hypocrisy of it is what we're meant to take away from it, Joanna. I didn't feel it when I was watching it.
I think that perhaps Zoe Saldana's character's like belief in Emilia undercuts this point that I'm just about to make. But like, to me, it's just saying all these people that you think are these like virtuous saviors or whatever can often do, especially people with massive amounts of wealth. How did they get it? Have this like other side to them.
Well, we would never have that in America, though. We don't have that with our leaders. No.
We're squeaky clean.
Yeah.
How do you a film that is so divisive, and not just divisive, but like people really dislike this movie? How do you feel like it became a Festival Jury Prize winner? And how do you think it was that Netflix looked at this and said, this is the thing we're going to put all of our muscle behind?
I think the Festival Jury Prize thing is not so hard to explain because the Festival Jury is like 8 people, like that's enough people like being on its wavelength. And one, all 4 of the actresses like won Best Actress prize together. Like there's something kind of exciting about watching all that happen together. Netflix going all in on it is the part that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around. I mean, they had a kind of small slate going into this year. We were talking about that earlier with with the strikes and everything. So it's kind of like they went to Cannes trying to figure out what their thing was going to be. They weren't going to get a Nora. So like this kind of felt like the next thing they could do. It's a weird fit for all of the new Netflix that we're talking about, even compared to some of the previous films they've backed as their big Oscar contenders. So I admire them. I'm glad they're going all for it. Like it's maybe the strangest movie that they've shepherded through the award season, but it is. I feel like if Netflix hadn't gotten behind it, like it could easily be like a Bleecker Street release that we'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that's an interesting thing that Zoe Saldana did. Moving on, and then never talk about it again.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more calculated than that, to be honest. I mean, in terms of how it won, it's very obvious to me how it won, which is that Audiard is an icon in France. He's won the Palme d'Or. I think he's won Best Director at Cannes in the past. He is one of the essential French filmmakers of the last 35 years. So there's that. Plus, you have in Selena Gomez an incredibly famous person who you can use to advertise the film. Mm-hmm. And this is a global film on a global streaming platform. It is a movie that features a Dominican Puerto Rican actress, a Mexican actress, a Spanish actress. You've got Edgar Ramirez in there. You've got a French filmmaker. It's set all across it's a continent hopping story. It appeals to a big, broad audience, even if some of the social themes are, I guess somewhat divisive in the way that it's told. It's got huge elements of like straight down the middle Sicario style crime thriller especially in the final act that will appeal to a lot of people. I think the musical stuff is very hit or miss because of the compositions, but as soon as Zoe Saldana started sort of like talk, sing, rapping in that first number, walking down the street, I was like, wow, this is captivating. Like I've never seen her do this before. She's got incredible chops, and I've not quite seen a story like this. I think your point though, Katey, about how like these are not hummable songs, it's really going to be held against it in that respect, especially when you compare it to something like Wicked Part 1, which is just 9 earworms lodged into your head. But I can really see the sort of both commercial and awards instincts that the company had coming off of a strike year with a sort of decentralized awards apparatus inside of the company. Whether or not it's actually going to do what it wants to do, I don't know. I mean, if this has 10 nominations and 0 wins, will you be surprised?
No.
Do you think it doesn't have a strong chance in international feature?
I have been assuming so, but I haven't gone back and looked lately at what else is up to. It did feel like kind of the heavy hitter there.
It definitely is the front runner. And I think that All We Imagine Is Life, for example, not being selected by India very, very clearly means that Emilia Pérez has a big opportunity. And
I think it's one of those things where, like, if it gets nominated for Best Picture, which we all think it will at this point in the year. That one of those things where it's like it's nominated in both international feature and best picture, that sort of like makes it feel like, you know, the top of the top inside of the international feature category.
Yeah.
So
that is what happened with Zone of Interest last year.
Yeah. I mean, Seed of the Sacred Fig is another Cannes title that Germany has submitted. Like that one, I haven't seen that one, but I know it's got like big critical support. And then one that I saw at Toronto, I don't know if either of you guys have seen I'm Still Here, the Walter Salles Brazilian film.
I was supposed to see it yesterday, and a lunch ran long, and I missed it. It is a
good.
huge hit in Brazil right now. It's like one of the biggest films in years.
Yeah, I mean, like it's got. You'll probably have time to talk about it later. But when I saw that one, I was like, okay, like if people see that international feature is such a strange category every single year, the shortlist is going to come in December. We'll see what's in there, but there is competition. It's not Emilia Pérez walking away with it, I don't think.
Yeah, Seed of the Sacred Fig is neon. I was a little bit more mixed on that as well, but it certainly is a very timely film that you could see breaking through. I guess you're right, Joe, that we should be considering it for holding space for international.
I also feel like Zoe Saldana could win still, despite all the skepticism around Emilia Pérez. Like she's horrific in this movie.
She is. And it's such a good, sorry to bring my like House of Art credentials in here, but it's such a good post Gomorrah like move for her. Like she is having such a good, I'm putting my Marvel money to use to do exactly what I want to do kind of career right now. So.
All due respect, her post Gamora move was Lioness. So,
I knew you were gonna. I'm so sorry, but Lioness in conjunction with Emilia Pérez is a real strong Zoe move. So yeah.
Let's talk about supporting actress in a little bit more depth here. Zoe Saldana, I think, is a front runner.
If Ariana Grande kicks out Selena Gomez from her slot, supporting actress, it will be extremely funny. The 2010s pop star wars is coming back to roost.
That does kind of work for me.
Sorry, Sean.
I love Selena. Personally, she's just not good in this movie. So, you know, if someone wants to take her spot, then sure.
I think, here's what I think is in contention for supporting actress right now.
Okay.
We've got Zoe Saldana. We mentioned Saoirse Ronan in Blitz. We mentioned Danielle Deadwyler in The Piano Lesson. We mentioned Ariana Grande. We mentioned Selena Gomez. I think it's going to be tough for her with Zoe Saldana already pretty far ahead there. And then there's Isabella Rossellini. From Conclave, which is a very small part. There's Felicity Jones from The Brutalist, which I would argue is the least well-written aspect of that film, but we can talk about that. And then what else? Maybe Carrie Coon and His Three Daughters, Monica Barbaro in A Complete Unknown. It's a handful of other
Aunjanue Ellis-Taylor in The Nickel Boys. I think she's like, and in terms of singling out an acting contender from that movie, I think she has the best chance.
It's a good point.
Are they running Margaret Qualley in lead?
They're running her in supporting, at least according to people on Gold Derby, which is usually what I take as my gospel.
I would say Margaret Qualley.
Yeah, that would be extremely well deserved.
Do you see Demi Moore getting into Best Actress?
She's not on my little post-it that I wrote for myself, although that's been a while now. Best Actress is so crazy. It's so competitive. I've been thinking about Carla Sofia Gascon, actually, because she stands to be the first openly trans actor to ever get an acting nomination. And I think her not getting in would be read as this enormous snub, even though I think with what we've talked about Emilia Pérez, it's a challenge for reasons completely outside of representation. Because there's like 10 excellent Best Actress contenders. And, you know, you could just pick and choose at random and have a perfect lineup there.
Yeah, I have not really spent enough time thinking about Best Actress other than I think Mikey Madison is going to win. But Angelina Jolie and Tilda Swinton and Nicole Kidman are all competing pretty hard in that category. And Cynthia Erivo now, if Wicked is the phenomenon that we expect, it could be a little tricky for
Marianne
Carla Sofia
Jean-Baptiste. Do not sleep on her. Hard Truths is playing like gangbusters everywhere it goes.
Good point. I don't know, guys.
I mean, this happens every year, right? Where at least the last couple of years, where Best Actress is just this absolute bloodbath, and Best Actor, you're like, who can
number five?
It's every single year, and like men dominate Hollywood in so many ways, and this is the one place where the actresses pick up.
Every single audition for a school play that I ever attended, it's like 3 guys and
go find someone from the football
girls.
team who wants to audition.
Exactly.
I never was one of those guys. I think I regret not being one of those guys. That would have been a good lifestyle choice for me.
You would have crushed. You would have crushed.
Straight guy who loves theater.
Yeah.
Just get in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Missed opportunity.
Another life, Sean. Another life.
Yeah. It's too bad. I was too busy being Timothée Chalamet and Lady Bird reading Howard Zinn on the hood of my car in the parking lot.
Calling things tight.
Yeah.
When you could have been
honestly,
Lucas
yes, that's one of
Hedges.
the most accurate movies ever made. That movie is chilling how accurate it is.
And yet you still have a cell phone. You let the government track you.
I
Right there in
do.
your pocket.
I know. They're following me. Well, I just got co-opted by the system. Now I'm a part of the machine.
Yep.
I'm just,
It
I'm
all
a power
happens to all
broker
of
now.
us. Yep.
Wow.
What else do you want to say about? I mean, Emilia Pérez is a movie that like people have been talking about for 7 months. I watched it
Mhm.
again last night, and I was like, it's all right. Like,
I know.
It's weird.
I think people should see it, but I think it's a really hard, to our earlier conversation about The Brutalist, a really hard home watch. You have like, especially because you have to watch it with subtitles, you know what I mean? And like people are used to doing that with a lot of Netflix content, but I still think because it just swings all over the place in tone, it's such an easy thing to just pause and walk away from or something like that. And so like,
But I would
but I-
argue that like makes you turn away for a second. You're like, wait, what's going on? It kind of
Agree.
like when I revisit it
Interesting.
at home, it kind of drew me back in more than I expected it to.
I if anyone's listened this far and hasn't seen it, I think you should see it.
Yes.
That's what I would say. I really think you should see it, and I think you should see it in a theater. But if you want to watch it at home, that works too. But like, I don't think it's a successful experiment, but it's it's an experiment worth looking at. So
I would say my prediction is going to be it's going to get more like the people who only watch the clips on Twitter and seen the negative Letterboxd reviews are going to see like, wait, how many Oscar nominations did this get? Like, it's going to feel like a surprise. I just want to like predict that will happen. Like, it's going to do well with nominations, whether it wins anything. I think it's going to stick around long enough to do that.
Yeah, I've seen it compared to Crash a bit
Wow.
on social media, which is a bit rude.
Wow.
what
But the Academy has a history of nominating movies that feel like they're not going to age well, that feel like they're almost
mean, like,
fantasies of.
What could you mean? What could you mean?
what in the Green Book are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's another movie. I don't think this has anything to do with Green Book, but that's another example of Bohemian Rhapsody is a film that had many, many Oscar nominations that is like actively bad.
Went
Genuinely
viral on
bad.
social media for being
Yeah.
poorly made, and yet it worked
Yeah.
out anyway. So yeah, and like our list
This
that we
movie is
made,
better than those movies. In my
it's like
opinion.
yes, and we made a list of like really good movies that we think are the Best Picture contenders. Like the Best Picture 10 over the last 10 years is just like the batting average has gone up so high, like it just gets better. So like
Yeah.
if you have one in there that's divisive and like maybe only appealing in the broadest way to a smaller group of voters, like that's usually what happens.
Well, I think this was a successful experiment. I'm happy to have reunited you guys
Oh
on
my
a
God.
podcast talking about awards. That's really great.
What a
Any
thrill.
closing thoughts?
I love making an Oscar list and then immediately regretting it and feeling like I should have changed it. And
Big
for
same.
some reason that brings us joy. Why do we do this to ourselves? I don't know, but it's the only way I know how to do it.
I was just gonna say I like to think it's something about fixing the pain of my childhood. That there's something that if only I could just get this right.
I
If
know.
only I could just guess these movies correctly. And I'll be able to
Everything
fill
will
the
fall into
gaping
place.
hole.
Wow. I just want to say, and I don't know if this is against company policy, but I'll just say that like following Katey Rich's newsletter has been one of the joys of my life since she's been at the Angler,
Wow.
and it keeps me really well informed, and they're really fun reads. So I suggest that you subscribe to Katey's
Wow.
newsletter.
Now the Spotify HR is going to have to give you a call. I appreciate it. I hope it was worth
That's
it.
not how it works
Thank
here.
you.
Come on, guys. This is a very warm, generous. You're on the episode for crying out loud. Listen to the Prestige Junkie podcast. Read
Thank
Katie's
you.
newsletter. Joanna, you're on like 14 pods. What pods are you on these days?
House of R, Trial by Content, Prestige TV, which is not the same as Prestige Junkie.
No,
but,
I did
you
not
know.
steal your title. I promise it was there before
We
I
know.
got there.
We know.
That's it. Nothing else. You don't want to. You're not appearing on the Ringer NFL show these days.
Stay tuned. Who knows? Who
How
can
exciting.
say?
Thank you, Katie and Joanna. Thanks to Jack Sanders. Thanks to our producer, Bobby Wagner, for his work on today's episode. I'm sitting right beside him here in the New York office. How exciting. Next week on the show, Joanna is coming back. We're talking about 2 films. One, the film that she insulted, A Real Pain, and
No,
undermined
come on.
its awards chances, which I think is one of the best movies of the year, starring Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg. And we'll also talk about Red 1, which I still have not seen, but I'm not hearing great things about it.
You and I have a great weekend in front of us watching that film.
We'll see you guys then.